Having previously made a series of videos on the centennial of the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historical Preservation, I would like to continue my series on state parks history with the neighboring state of New Jersey, which stretches from the Ramapo Mountains to Cape May, between the Delaware River and the Hudson River and Atlantic Ocean, the state that is sandwiched between the metropolises of New York and Philadelphia. And New Jersey has its own state park service, that is, has a tree as its logo, in contrast to the leaf that is New York State. As a New Yorker, I sometimes think of New Jersey as a state of highways, tangles of ramps where if you miss your exit, you'll be on the highway for a long time, where it almost feels like you're in a pinball machine of twists and turns, sandwiched between the Garden State Parkway and the New Jersey Turnpike and the suburban sprawl in between. And yet, this is known as the Garden State. And so much of its reputation as the Garden State comes from its state parks. Just like in my previous videos, when I talk about the State Park Service, it includes state historic sites and recreation areas as well. And just like in my previous series, I will begin with the state parks that are closest to the Big Apple and zoom out from there. And the state park that's closest to New York City is Liberty State Park, which opened in 1976 and has 1,212 acres. It was created to commemorate the country's bicentennial by taking a formerly industrial waterfront and an abandoned rail yard and giving it back to nature, with a walkway behind the Statue of Liberty on Ellis Island, as well as the Central Railroad of New Jersey terminal turned into a historic space. This state park also has the Liberty Science Center, a regional magnet for science education and school trips. And the history of Liberty State Park began with Morris Pessin, who in 1958, on a foggy, drizzly morning, took a boat from Jersey City to Statue of Liberty as a way of declaring that this statue and Ellis Island belong as much to New Jersey as they do to New York. He began the movement to transform this waterfront into the busiest, most heavily visited state park in New Jersey. But there's so much more to say here. On the north border of this park is the Morris Canal Basin, part of a much longer canal that reached inland into New Jersey. The Central Railroad of New Jersey operated until 1967, connecting commuters to ferries that took them to Manhattan, but nearly two-thirds of immigrants who landed at Ellis Island did not settle in lower Manhattan. Instead, they took the boat to this railroad terminal and then trains that took them to cities in the points west across this country. Here's a picture of President Ronald Reagan in 1986 on the centennial of the Statue of Liberty, speaking from Liberty State Park. Looking at older aerial photos of Liberty State Park, we see the train tracks, Morris Canal, Liberty and Ellis Island, and a smaller pier here called Black Tom Island, which was a munitions depot that blew up mysteriously in 1916, blamed on German agents, and was one of those reasons that contributed to the American entry to World War I in 1917. Ellis Island is divided between New York State and New Jersey per a Supreme Court ruling made in the 1990s. Here you can see other images of this dumping ground and salt marshes behind the Statue of Liberty. And I think it's nice that there's a state park behind the statue, because rather than apartments or suburban sprawl, we have what looks like a prairie, the vastness of the American landscape behind the Statue of Liberty. And truly, that's the way it is, because to the west of this state park is the beginning of the country, which continues for 3,000 miles before you hit the west coast. Within Liberty State Park, there's a 9/11 memorial that points to the site of the Twin Towers. There are war memorials and historical markers testifying to its place as a transportation hub. The interior of the park is subject to many different proposals over the years, between expanding on the sports and recreation or expanding on natural restoration, a debate that continues today. The next state park is Palisades Interstate Park, which stretches from 12 miles from the George Washington Bridge in Fort Lee to the New York State border. It is 2,500 acres in total, and it's not run by the New Jersey State Park Service. Rather, it's run by a separate agency called the Palisades Interstate Park Commission that was formed in 1900 by the governors of New York and New Jersey. The preservation of the Palisades Cliffs was the result of a battle waged by the New Jersey State Federation of Women's Clubs, who set out to persuade the state legislature to pass a bill, together with the state of New York, to protect these picturesque cliffs overlooking the great river. By 1900, New Jersey State Governor Foster Voorhees was able to sign that bill into law. And in New York, it passed under Governor Theodore Roosevelt. Banker J.P. Morgan, not the bank, but the person, John Pierpont Morgan, donated over $125,000 to purchase the quarries along the waterfront that were blasting away at these cliffs. The last one, Carpenter Brothers Quarry, Fort Lee, was the largest of them all. And in 1909, the park was dedicated on the tercentenary, the 300 years since Henry Hudson's voyage up the river that now carries his name. You can see the logo of the Palisades Interstate Park showing two leaves representing New York and New Jersey. In Fort Lee, there's a fort from the Revolutionary War. You can see the cliffs from the river. They haven't changed since Henry Hudson saw them. And some places, the park goes further inland, the Tenafly Nature Center and the Lost Brook Preserve. You have creeks, waterfalls within this preserve, great place for fall foliage. And in the past, there wasn't just quarries here. There were also various hotels and restaurants that were gradually demolished to allow nature to reclaim the space. You can see the Women's Club Tower installed in 1929, honoring the women who fought to make this park a reality. And throughout the park, you could travel in your car on the Palisades Interstate Parkway, which was built in the 1950s, connecting all the parks of the Palisades Interstate family of state parks, all the way up to Bear Mountain State Park in New York. You can see here, this is a map from the 1920s, going from the Palisades Interstate Park in Fort Lee up to Blauvelt, Rockland Lake, Hook Mountain, High Tor, Harriman, and Bear Mountain, and Storm King as the northernmost example of these interstate parks. And the land along the highway is parkland. Within the park, there's a history of British soldiers hiking up the cliffs to take Fort Lee from the Patriots, which they occupied until the end of the Revolutionary War in 1783. Within the park, there's the site of the Palisades Mountain House, a hotel that existed till the 1880s. There have been books written about this park. My favorite one is by Robert Benoist, talking about Palisades as the People's Park. There's old brochures you could find and old photos, including here one of John D. Rockefeller Sr. and John D. Rockefeller Jr., whose money made this park possible. The next state park is Ramapo Mountain State Forest. Within the Ramapo Mountain State Forest, which was dedicated in 1976 at 4,269 acres, it was here in the 1920s that Clifford McAvoy began buying up property and deeds to form the Bergen County Hunting and Fishing Club. 1924, within this fishing club, he created a hilltop mansion they called Rye Cliff, connecting his name, Clifford, and his wife's maiden name, Ryerson. 1976, the majority of Rye Cliff's area was conveyed by a trustee of the estate to the state of New Jersey to become a state forest. What remains of the estate? Just these stone ruins that look much older than what they really are. This is Ramapo Mountain State Forest, named after the local Ramapo Indians, the Ramapo natives, some of whose descendants still live in the area, have their own dialects of English and Dutch over the centuries, as a way of preserving their language within the larger society. This is Ramapo Mountain. Northern Green State Forest was dedicated in 1946 at 5,416 acres, has hills ranging from 400 to 1,300 feet in elevation, providing views of distant Manhattan. It is adjacent to Long Pond Ironworks State Park and the Wannock Reservoir State Wildlife Management Area. Northern Green lived here from 1893 to 1955. As a child, he spent a lot of time at nearby Ringwood Manor with his grandparents and his family's summer estate. He went on to become the chairman of the board at the Ganley Mountain Coal Company in West Virginia, Ringwood Company, New Jersey, Electric Ferries of New York, and also was on the committees for IBM, Okanite Company, Intertype Corporation, and the Brooklyn Savings Bank. So quite the successful businessman, Northern Green. In 1919, became the treasurer of the borough of Ringwood and then became the mayor of Ringwood. So went into politics too, collected art and antiques, supported colleges, New York Historical Society, Cooper Union, Metropolitan Museum, Brooklyn Polytechnical, and Columbia College too. So philanthropist who really gave back to a lot of institutions, and this is a state park carrying his name. You can see it's obtained in parcels and partially connected to neighboring local and state properties. Ringwood State Park, also relating to the history of Northern Green. It was dedicated by the state in 1937 at 4,444 acres, located in Ramapo Mountain. Has the historic Ringwood Manor with its collegiate Gothic architecture, the New Jersey Botanical Gardens, so the Garden of the Garden State at Skyland Manor, and the Shepherd Lake Recreation Area. within the Ringwood State Park that touches on the border of New York State, close to Ringwood Lake. Long Pond Ironworks State Park. It dedicated in 1974, 6,911 acres. It has Monksville Reservoir and the ruins of the Long Pond Ironworks, where in the 18th and 19th century, iron was obtained from these mountains and used in metallurgy from 1760s to the 1880s along the Wanacue River. So you can see remnants of the ironworks and the dwellings where the workers lived and historical signs within this state park that also has plenty of hiking trails between its lakes. Abram S. Hewitt State Forest, named after Abraham Stevens Hewitt, dedicated by the state in 1951 at 2,001 acres, located on Bearfoot Ridge. The namesake was lived from 1820s to 1903, was an educator, iron-making industrialist, lawyer, who later became New York City mayor, congressman, and the president of the Democratic National Committee in the 1876 elections that were very closely fought. Nearby Ringwood Manor was donated by the state by Hewitt's son Erskine Hewitt in 1936. So this is the Abram Hewitt State Forest with hiking trails that go into New York State. You can see the state border drawn on one of the rocks here. It also connects to Wawayanda State Park. A lot of the information I learned about these state parks can be found in books such as the New Jersey State Parks Guide, High Point State Parks, 50 Hikes in New Jersey, Hackle-Barney-Vorey State Park, and some of the other great books that you could find on these perpetual public green spaces. For the next part of this video, in part 2 of the state parks of northern New Jersey, I will talk about those in the corner of the state known as the Skylands of New Jersey in Sussex and Warren counties, including High Point, the highest point in the state. Now, New Jersey has very much its own sense of identity, not just with its yellow state flag that has a state seal, but it's also the flag of Jersey City, which kind of resembles the flag of NYC. And likewise, Newark has its own flag, so does Atlantic City, and so does Trenton for your hyper-local pride. After speaking about the state parks in the northeast corner, I will then talk about the state parks in central Jersey and then South Jersey. So as we go from the 201 to the 732 to the 609 area codes that define this state. Again, I welcome comments and feedback on these green spaces and look forward to making the next video. Thank you so much.